Welcome to the Bojack Podcast Horseman Obviously. This is episode number 6. My name is Dominic and I'm joined by Matthew.
Hello.
The aim of this podcast is for me to convince Matthew that Bojack Horseman is the greatest animated TV series of all time. And in this episode, we will be discussing Series 1, Episode 6. Our A story is a D story. Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Yeah, great, thank you. First time we're recording the podcast in the light, so
yeah,
it's different.
We've started a lot earlier today because we used to start quite late, and I suppose it was me always thinking that we can shorten the recording time, and maybe that's my optimism. Even if we do this and it takes an hour and a half to listen to in total, it's still easily 2.5 hours to record.
We do have nature on our side. It's getting lighter earlier, and the clocks have changed. So
they have, yes. It feels like spring is here, doesn't it?
It does.
Spring is in.
Last couple of days have been lovely.
So, do you want to talk us through what happens in this episode then?
Yeah, I can try. I watched it last night, pretty late. So, the first scene is outside the airport.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I suppose, without me jumping in, this is a real continuation from the last episode.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it really, it's literally it's almost like we just had an ad break rather than a new episode.
So Mr. Peanut Butter is picking up Diane and Bojack from the airport after their trip to the East Coast. This is the first time that, during this scene, we see Mr. Peanut Butter acknowledge the fact that maybe there's something going on between Diane and Bojack. Maybe there's some kind of feelings there that are more than just a writer working with her subject. We then have a scene at a restaurant where this escalates, and Mr. Peanut Butter and Bojack go through elaborate competition to try and outdo each other for Diane's favour, kind of indirectly, because she doesn't really care. Then Mr. Peanut Butter leaves with Diane, and Bojack gets really drunk, and then wakes up the next day and finds out that he has stolen the D from the Hollywood Hills sign as an offering for Diane. Then it spirals from there into how we're going to get out of this situation. The Todd subplot is that he's still in prison, and for most of the episode, Bojack is still completely unaware that he's in prison, and Todd finds himself being courted by 2 different gang factions, and he has to try and appease them both.
The Todd story is the 2 days to the prom.
Okay.
Story.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want to let either side feel bad. So he's like, oh, I'll just pretend to date you and pretend to date you. And
he doesn't want to let either side feel bad because they'll kill him.
Yes, because it's prison.
There's much more than just hurt feelings going on here.
Yes, no, you're right. It's prison.
Yeah.
No, yes. So this is the stealing of the D.
Yes.
Is the big part of this, and you're right.
It's not okay. So I'm just gonna get straight to the point on this. It's not just about the stealing of the D. It's about the giving of the D. Because at first it does seem innocent that it's D for Diane.
Yes.
But then as the episode goes on more and more, there's more innuendos suggesting that D is
the D.
The D. Yeah. And especially with like the macho kind of like one-upmanship going on between Bojack and Mr. Peanut Butter. By the end of the episode, I was quite convinced that this is a double entendre thing going on.
There's actually one point where I think it's on one of Bojack's drunken voicemails where he says something like, so he can suck my D.
Yeah.
So he explicitly says it at one point.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is directed by J.C. Gonzalez, and it's written by Raphael Bob Raxberg and Scott Marder. Scott Marder is an executive producer of Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Which I believe people like quite a lot of it. And that's one of the shows that I always mean to start watching, but never do.
I agree. Yeah.
Have you watched it?
No, but almost everyone that I know watches it and raves about it.
Even better, he is a executive producer and showrunner in Rick and Morty, season 4 to 7.
Okay.
And I was looking at titles of credits, and showrunner or executive producer / showrunner in TV is the final decision maker.
Yep.
It's the person, so almost like on top of the director.
Yep.
And he would have got that part after Bojack, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Because Bojack I think it started before Rick and Morty.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't know whether I could pick a season of Rick and Morty that I thought was better or worse, but I think it definitely develops over time.
I think this is pretty consistent, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I suppose what I meant is, like, I feel like there's more levels to the later episodes that I've seen, as opposed to the introductory character ones at the start.
I wouldn't know because I've not rewatched it, so I'd have to go back and rewatch it to see that.
So yes, this episode starts with Mr. Peanut Butter picking up Diane and Bojack from the airport because they've just been to see Diane's family, and this is the other side of the plane journey. And if I just call back to the end of the last episode, it finishes with Todd on the phone in prison. So Todd is still in prison, and we sort of don't know what's going to happen about that at this stage.
This episode does have a few visual gags that I like.
Good.
And I think my favourite one is in this opening scene. I think it might be the first joke in the episode.
Go it.
When Mr. Peanut Butter is holding up a sign saying honey, and the bear approaches and just stands there expectantly. Because you're like,
yes,
I don't understand what's going on when it first happens. And then Mr. Peanut Butter's like, oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm not offering honey. This is a sign for my girlfriend who I call Honey.
Did you also see what his license plate reads?
Remind me?
Good boy.
Good boy, yeah, that was it.
So
I also saw the boot of his car with nothing but tennis balls.
So Mr. Peanut Butter greets Diane and they have a bit of a kiss, and Bojack has this animation of awkwardness and discomfort very quickly. He's like oh God, now I'm back in reality. Mr. Peanut Butter goes to shake Bojack's hand, and Bojack's like, I'm not going to shake your hand. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm not giving you anything. Maybe because it's the rival thing a bit of he's liking Diane, or maybe it's just this relationship he has with Mr. Peanut Butter anyway, where he doesn't want to act like he's his friend, whereas I think we will presume that he is. Or Mr. Peanut Butter sees them as friends anyway.
Or he's just a dick.
Which he is.
Yeah.
So anyway, he doesn't give him the handshake, and Mr. Peanut Butter says, I'm going to get that handshake, which is a nice lead up to another joke later. So Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter offer to give Bojack a ride home from the airport. And we cut to Todd now in jail. He's in the line waiting for some food. So he's having his sort of first couple of days in jail. And there's quite a nice inmate in front of him who says, stick with me and you'll be just... And just before he can finish with the sentence, he gets stabbed up in jail.
Yeah, he gets stabbed 800 times. Like, stabbed all over. It's very violent.
Blood in his face.
Yes, very violent.
Which I think is really... I mean... without wanting to explain a joke in the most detail possible, I really like the fact that this might have been Todd's security in jail. It might have been like, right, I can have an alliance, I can have a friendship, I can know someone, he can show me the ropes. And this was almost like the olive branch being extended. But then before he could grab it, it was cut off.
Yeah.
So just before they get in the car for the ride home, Diane and Bojack share a couple of in-jokes.
Yeah.
And these are jokes. There's obviously a Ben Stiller reference.
Yeah.
That we're probably actually not supposed to know the reference, because I think it's supposed to be a joke between them, isn't it? But they're having this sort of back and forth. And Mr. Peanut Butter is looking a bit worried. And as Diane gets into the car, he turns to Bojack and he says, "This is going to sound really weird, but there's nothing that I should be worried about between you and Diane, is there?" And Bojack he does this exaggerated what? He goes, "What?"
Yeah. Mr. Peanut Butter also, the way that he words it is very like that as well.
Okay, yeah, he's trying to ask the question without asking the question, isn't he? He's trying to be like,
"There's nothing I should be worried about, right?"
Yeah.
Something like that.
They both have this sort of awkward conversation. Bojack denies it. He goes, "No, there's nothing to worry about." And then Mr. Peanut Butter's like, "Oh, thank God. I'm so relieved that there's nothing to worry about. Let's get on with it." But this is, I think it's probably just for the episode and for the story and for a few other things. But I think it's weird that you would ask your friend if there was anything to be worried about.
Not his friend, though.
Okay. He thinks he's his friend. I think Mr. Peanut Butter thinks he's Bojack's friend.
I know he's stupid, but I don't think he's that stupid.
Okay.
I think he's still trying to win him over.
Right. Okay. If your partner was not flirting, but getting on very well with someone else, and you were suspicious of them, what I'm asking is, would you ask that person, or would you ask your partner?
Yeah, you'd ask your partner, wouldn't you?
So I think it's a bit weird that he asks Bojack.
Yeah.
But I think it's...
But he admires Bojack, though. I think he looks up to Bojack in a weird way, because Bojack
was his predecessor.
Yeah.
Okay. But I just think I felt it was a bit weird. Maybe we don't see the conversation with Diane that he has, but I just feel it was weird he asked.
Also, remember that Mr. Peanut Butter is really stupid, so,
Well, that's what I was sort of thinking, that he's naive and he doesn't care that it might be a bit awkward asking that question.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think I appreciated that what though as well.
Okay.
The exaggerated what. I thought it was an example of Will Arnett's voice acting again.
Okay.
I think whether it's because I'm trying to do it facing you and there's a thing about that, but even when I tried to do it at home myself, when I was thinking like, what? Like the inflection I think is really difficult. And I know it's just us saying again, or me saying again, that he's a good voice actor and he's a good actor. The more I've recorded my voice for other stuff recently and tried to have inflections, like it's so difficult.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those things that seems very, very easy, and the character of the word. Yeah, I fanboying, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's the way that he says it implies that it's like, yes, there is something to worry about.
Yes,
but you're being crazy. It's kind of like he's gaslighting him.
It's the double meaning in the same word. It's the double meaning in one word. Yeah, that's mental. Now I'm thinking about it even more. I like it even more.
Yeah.
This leads us into the opening credits.
Yep.
As we come out of the opening credits, Mr. Peanut Butter has his head out the window as he's driving like a dog again. So they're really going ham on the dog references for this one.
Yeah.
Bojack suggests that they should go and grab some dinner. Mr. Peanut Butter sort of says, "Well, I've already made special plans with Diane." But then Diane does also sort of suggest that they should go for a meal, or he should come, which I don't know whether it's her politeness or her reciprocation of what we're sort of thinking Bojack's feeling, whether it's her also like, I want to spend more time with Bojack. But she frames it as, you're always wanting Bojack to call you back.
Yeah.
You always she frames it as what you're the one that always wants to spend time with Bojack.
Yeah.
So why are you putting up?
Yeah.
Why don't we just go for a meal with him?
Yeah.
So Mr. Peanut Butter reluctantly lets Bojack come. When they're at the meal, he has this sort of awkward seat on the corner, and Bojack and Diane are sitting in the booth.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's obviously supposed to be like a 2-person booth,
Yeah.
quite cozy, intimate.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Peanut Butter's been sort of forced on the end.
Yeah. There's no way to walk into him at
Yes.
some point.
Yeah. They're all sort of like biting into him. He's, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So again, Diane and Bojack have sort of like forced themselves together a little bit. And Diane and Bojack are continuing to share memories as well of the plane ride. So there's obviously like, do you know what? I think from calling back to the last episode again, I think it's probably important to remember just how sort of vulnerable Diane was in the last episode.
Yeah.
I bet Mr. Peanut Butter's not seen that side of her with her family.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an openness between them now.
Yeah, because at the end of the last episode, there was a real moment of connection between Diane and Bojack.
They were sat in the truck, weren't they?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to remember that as we're going through this episode. That it's not just two.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, to be fair. Yeah. That's a good point.
But again, it goes into the fact that it is a real continuation of the last episode.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. Yeah, I didn't think about the fact that Bojack and Diane really connected at the end of the last episode, and then whatever's happened since then, obviously, like, it's only strengthened their connection.
Yes. So the food arrives and Diane has something in her food which she almost chokes on, but it turns out it's this D pendant on a bracelet.
Yeah.
And Mr. Peanut Butter says, I got you a D pendant because I'm dependent on you. Which I think when I first hear that, I'm like, that's not why it's a D.
No.
I don't know whether he's trying to, I don't know whether he's like, obviously it's a D for Diane and you're Diane, so I'm going to add another level to it. Yeah. Or whether he's not even clocked that the D is the same as Diane, which could be funny. Bojack has a nice little eye roll here as well to demonstrate his sort of frustration with being left out of the relationship, or he's having Diane taken away from him. But to counter that, Bojack orders some champagne to congratulate the couple.
So one of the line that I kind of liked when Diane says something like, that's the sweetest choking hazard anyone's ever given me, or something. Yeah.
And that's one of sort of Diane's like charms, I think, is that she appreciates what people are doing sometimes, but also a bit like Bojack has a different perspective.
What I didn't realise until now is that I'm actually liking Diane less and less as the series goes on.
Yeah, I think the first episode, you were like, this is the first character I've not disliked.
Yeah, it's the first episode. She's the only character that I don't dislike. And as the series goes on more and more, I like her less and less. Right. Especially after this episode.
Is that because of something that happens later in the episode, or is it something else?
It's a culmination of things, but the end of the episode is a bit like, come on, Diane.
Okay. So Bojack's ordered the champagne and Mr. Peanut Butter sort of realises that a bit of the light has been taken away from him again. And he goes, no, Bojack, we need to order off the menu to get expensive champagne. Like, I'm the bigger man still. And then Bojack says, no, I'm going to order a drink off the menu for everybody in the restaurant. And this sort of one-upmanship sort of continues. Mr. Peanut Butter says he's going to buy everybody an Xbox. But this is the bit I quite like, where Bojack says, Mr. Peanut Butter is just ripping off his toast like he ripped off my whole career. And then someone in the restaurant grumbles, we prefer gifts than observations. Everyone in the restaurant is like quite enjoying having drinks bought for them and Xboxes. And now Bojack's tried to one-up him, but instead of actually giving a gift, he's been like, it's just an observation.
Okay.
Someone in the restaurant is like, we prefer gifts. Like, can you not just make...
I missed that.
Yeah, it's quite nice because it's almost like they were just happy to be given stuff by these famous people, and then one of them's turned around and they were expecting it to escalate, and now one of them's not escalated it. They're like, oh, it's not good. Like, maybe it's ungratefulness, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that ungratefulness is quite funny.
Yeah.
While Bojack was making this observation, Mr. Peanut Butter's brought a helicopter and he offers to give everybody in the restaurant a ride in this helicopter. And finally, Bojack buys the restaurant that they're in. And he says, don't worry, we can just stay as long as we want. I bought the restaurant, and he gets one of them, the waiters, to do like a funny dance. So all of this has started from a little display of affection and someone trying to join in, but it's escalated out of control already.
Yeah. And it ties in with the other theme of the episode, that when it comes to these kind of like macho ego competitions, they're often can be referred to as a dick measuring contest. Just always trying to one up each other, and so like brings it back around to the D theme. Although I was surprised, and I know that Bojack's his show was successful and he has a nice house, but the ability to just buy a restaurant like that, I don't know if it's just like artistic license and they just do that, but I wasn't expecting to have that kind of disposable income.
Yes. No, I suppose that I'm thinking that he is very well off with his house, and the fact that he doesn't work or hasn't worked for so long sort of shows he must have a continual income. That he's very well off.
With Bojack, it's been implied that he's washed up.
Yes.
And like, he does have a nice house, but maybe he's already paid off his mortgage, and like, he can be living off the royalties of his show that might get reruns or whatever, or might have DVD sales or whatever. But the whole point of him writing this book with Diane is to make him relevant again.
Yes, yeah.
So if he's not relevant, I don't understand. I might have underestimated how popular Horsing Around was.
Okay. Although I think what you first said about it being artistic license is the actual thing. It's just a way of them one-upping each other.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, while this is going on, Todd is now showering in prison. He reaches for some soap in prison, and he touches hands with one of the skinheads who tries to convince Todd to join their gang because he says we both like keeping ourselves clean.
No, they say cleansing.
Cleansing.
Specifically use the term cleansing.
Yes, we both like cleansing, but he's referring to ethnic cleansing as opposed to Todd, physical cleansing. Yeah. And was the other thing they were both white?
Yeah, I think I might be wrong. I might be wrong, but I think he says something like, "We both like being white and cleansing."
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So
he's like, "You should join our gang."
Yeah.
And there's a joke at the end of that scene where he pulls out a business card with his name on it. So I was like, whoa, where did you go?
Yeah, I don't want to know where that came
from. So back at the restaurant, Mr. Peanut Butter and Bojack are now doing a push-up competition.
This is after the camera's panned across a whole pile of other stuff that they've been making.
There's a title card that says a series of stupid and incredibly petty challenges.
So it's like there's like a dartboard, and like there's all like basically the camera pans across the restaurant with just piles of like games and competitions that have obviously ensued.
They're not going to let this settle until one of them's won. Whatever winning is.
Yeah.
Because this is where the game that they are playing is like a board game or something.
No, they're playing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Isn't okay?
Yeah, because Bojack gets Todd on the phone and he says, "You're my phone a friend."
Well, Todd calls him.
Yeah.
He calls him from prison, wants him help.
Yeah.
And he's like, I need help. Bail's only $50. Something's not even expected. So he's crying out for help. And then that's the joke, isn't it? He goes, "Oh, thank God you've called me, Todd."
Yeah.
Like, because it's always set up.
You're my phone a friend.
Yeah.
What's the answer to this?
Yeah.
Completely ignores the fact that Todd says he's in prison.
Yes. Well, yeah, but he sets it up to be like, "Oh, I'm going to help you," but what he really wants is the answer to the question.
Yeah.
And Todd gets the question wrong, which Bojack's actually more annoyed about.
Mm-hmm.
Like he says, "Damn it, Todd, this was life or death."
Yeah.
And Todd's like, "Yeah, same here. This is life and death as well. Bail's only $50, and you can get him out." But Bojack just ignores it. The amount of bail is puts Bojack in a particularly bad light when we think about just how much money they have been spending up to this point. Yeah. Like the obscene amount of money.
No one cares about Todd.
No. Maybe, yeah, they see him as a side.
Which is fine, because the more this series goes on, the less I care about Todd as well.
Like, yeah, because again, a bit like Diane in the first episode, I felt like I got quite a positive reaction from you from Todd about Todd.
Yeah.
And that's what I sort of tried to mention at the time, that I definitely have this up and down relationship with Todd.
Yeah.
Well, I don't, not me, but the character. Like, some episodes I'm like, he's fantastic, and some episodes I'm like, I don't feel like you've added anything, and it's just a zany, wacky, ridiculous film.
That's the case in this episode. I don't feel like the prison arc has added anything.
The only thing that I was tying it to was, it was like, I was trying to tie it to the main story of Diane having 2 dates to the prom, and him having 2 dates.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So that's interesting.
There's a point later where he says, how did you deal with it on the show? And Bojack says, well, trying to keep both parties happy never ends well.
Okay.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's almost a bit of a message.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
And I don't know if I've written it in the notes, actually. But
I hadn't thought about that, and that tracks. That makes sense, that it's an analogy for... Yeah. The two storylines are kind of an analogy of each other.
Sometime after this phone call, Bojack beats Mr. Peanut Butter, and he declares himself the winner of the games. He is triumphant. And he shouts over to Diane, did you see that, Diane? And she's now asleep on the table. So all this sort of competition that's been going on between them, she has really not been interested in. And I think that sort of tracks with her character as well, that I don't see her as the type of person that would enjoy the affection or like the showmanship towards her. And I think that's the sort of thing that Bojack's missing about Diane, actually, here. Diane's asleep on the table, and she wakes up and she goes home with Mr. Peanut Butter.
Mr. Peanut Butter makes a point of saying that.
He does. He says, you're right, you win, old friend. Now, excuse me, I'm going to take my girlfriend to bed. This leaves Bojack thinking, I haven't won. Even though the competitions would dictate that. And it sort of also sets out that this is what this was about. Like, it was a competition for Diane, and someone has taken her home, so that's the winner. Bojack is very depressed at this point, and he goes to the bar and he says to the bartender...
I did like this.
Yeah. He asks for something to forget his problems.
And the bartender gives him cyanide.
He gives him cyanide first, and he goes, whoa, that's a bit too strong. Yeah. And then he gives him a bottle of vodka and he goes, what is it, breakfast? And then you get the absinthe out, and he goes, yeah, that's about right. Yeah. Which, yeah,
I did like that. Why is this breakfast?
This leads to Bojack blacking out and waking up on his living room floor with the news on, where we see Tom Jumbo Grumbo again, the whale, the news presenter, and he says police are trying to find out who stole the D from the famed Hollywood sign. And again, this is one of the points I think that you sort of mentioned a moment ago about it is just full of D's, this episode.
Yeah.
But this is almost one of the points where I think they're trying to force that idea onto us as well, because the spiel that Tom has is just full of D's, and he says he has a little pop at Randy.
I love I think this was my only
a laugh out loud.
True laugh out loud moment in the whole episode when he says this line. I can't remember what it is, but then he's like, he looks kind of off screen, he's like, what is this alliteration? Like, yes. Well, how? He's
annoyed, isn't he?
It's so good. And it's a good point, because whatever that sentence is he says, I was like, yeah, well done for saying that, because that's a mouthful. Yeah, it's very good. It's very well written.
Yes.
I did enjoy that bit.
So Bojack then sees this giant D on his balcony. And I think there's like a few sort of comedy moments where he's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like there's a few sort of
puts the pieces together.
And Diane turns up to continue writing on the book. Bojack obviously is embarrassed or shy, or I don't know quite how to...
Ashamed?
Okay, is it? I don't know whether it is I don't know what emotion he's feeling, that he doesn't want her to see this.
Guilt?
guilt. Yeah. I'm thinking he doesn't want to declare his love.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the bits I quite like, actually, where Bojack says, can't work on the book today, too ill, and then he says cough instead of coughing.
Yeah.
Which is, I just think it's funny.
It's really dumb.
It is, yeah. Like, there's no...
It's really dumb, and it wouldn't work if Diane doesn't call him out on it in that same scene when she's like, you just said cough.
Yes. And
so I did like that.
So Diane's like, you left me a voicemail last night, and there was a lot of wheezing and dismantling of metal by the sounds of it, and then some heavy grunting. And then Bojack says, I didn't say anything incriminating, did I? And she goes, as incriminating as that sentence? No.
Yeah.
So it is I think in America there's something that you can say, which I waive my Fourth Amendment right or something, because anything you say would incriminate yourself.
Okay.
Or actually, sorry, I think there's something in the UK where you can say, I refuse to answer that question on the basis that I will incriminate.
I think in America they call it pleading the fifth.
Pleading the fifth, that's it,
Yeah.
yes. So it's sort of like that in a sentence there.
Well, it's
now we know you're guilty of something.
It's the same it's the same in America and here. It's when the police say you have the right to remain silent.
Right, okay.
So that's your right.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
But it's, I suppose here Bojack's almost saying, have I got the right to remain silent?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to.
Yeah.
But now we know he knows that she's done something. I just like Diane's response to it. Again, like a little comment of someone else might have just said, no, I don't think there was anything incriminating.
Mm-hmm.
But she's called it out that actually him saying that as incriminating.
Yeah.
And then Diane says, but we had an appointment to write your book. And Bojack's like, oh, what an act. An act of flaking on an obligation, as a joke of like, they're very useless and you can't pin them down on anything, basically. So a bit of an entertainment joke there. But this is the line that really cements the first one, where Bojack just goes, he finishes the conversation by saying, cough, 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 cough. And then he says, door slam.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, it is a silly, stupid joke, and there's no right meaning.
Yeah. No, it was all right. I thought it was all right.
Bojack then calls Princess Caroline to help him out. He says he stole the D, and then Princess Caroline's like, why would you steal the D? And then it clicks in her head that he's stolen the D to impress Diane, his ghostwriter. So she says, don't tell me you're in love with your biographer. And again, we get the second exaggerated what from Bojack, where he's like, what?
I like this little insight into Princess, that we know that Bojack has feelings for Diane because we've seen all these scenes with them together.
Yes.
Princess hasn't seen any of that.
Right.
But yet she somehow manages to use her intuition to put this together with very little information. And I don't know if that's speaking to her as a character, as an agent, like someone who understands people. I don't know. I think it was an interesting display of Princess's strengths, like her abilities to read people.
I mean, they've been in a relationship together.
Mm-hmm.
She knows what Bojack is like.
I forgot that they were in a relationship.
Yeah. It's really weird. Like I say, it's
mentioned in the first episode. Then after that, it's literally just an agent
but then there
relationship.
Was an episode where they had sex again.
Yeah.
So they're sort of on and off.
Yeah.
But there is a moment where Bojack says, actually, the D might stand for David and David Boreanaz, because when he was drunk, he printed out loads of pictures of David Boreanaz, which is obviously a callback to the last episode.
Yeah.
And Princess Caroline's like, you did that.
Yeah.
She knows exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
Princess Caroline agrees to keep Diane busy while Bojack gets rid of this contraband, as they call it, get rid of the D. And as Bojack hangs up, we swing around and we see Mr. Peanut Butter is at Bojack's house. Bojack says to Mr. Peanut Butter, how did you know I stole this big D? And Mr. Peanut Butter's like, I followed the clues, I analysed the evidence, and he goes, oh yeah, you left me a voicemail. And Bojack has this moment where he's like, stop leaving voicemails.
Mm-hmm.
this is a bit of a theme with Bojack, and I was trying to think why he leaves so many voicemails, but I think it's actually, one, it's quite funny. There's a bit of a comedy aspect to it where when he gets drunk, he ends up doing stuff and saying stuff, because we've seen it in a couple now, haven't we, where he's left voicemails. But I was thinking about the idea that he's leaving these voicemails. It's like the way he's leaving these voicemails, it's almost like him trying to communicate with other people, but he's not able to. Like to have communication, we'd have a phone call and I'd talk to you and you'd talk to me back. Whereas Bojack's in this world where all he can do is leave a voicemail to people. So no one's listening to him. No one's communicating with him. So I think there's a comedy aspect, but I actually think it almost tells us about the world that Bojack's in his head, which I like, and is explored even more on one of the greatest episodes of this show.
Okay.
So, and I think I have told you, but hopefully you've forgotten about it. But I wanted to point out that little thought I had.
Yeah. I think maybe it's also the fact that he just wants to get stuff off his chest.
Yes.
So, like, you know, sometimes you'll call someone expecting them to pick up, and if they don't, and it goes to voicemail, you just hang up and you're like, oh, I'll call them later. Whereas Bojack seems to be like, no, I've committed to making this point. Like, I already know what I want to say, so I'm just going to say it now on voicemail.
Yes, I like what you're saying about him getting it off his chest, because I think something that stands out to me about Bojack is that he has got things to say. He's got thoughts and he's got opinions.
He's also very impulsive.
Yes, he is. Well, he's not able to control his impulse. Yeah. So when he has a thought later, when he's drunk and everyone's sleeping, he's telling them, I don't care.
Yeah.
So yes, I like his voicemails, and I wish I could hear them, if I'm honest, but I don't think we ever do hear them. So Mr. Peanut Butter says, admit it, you like my girlfriend. And Bojack says, oh, come on. I mean, am I attracted to her? Sure. Do my days feel better when I'm around her? Yes. Does she get me in ways no other woman ever has? Indubitably. Do I fantasize about her? Yes, but only in two positions. Look, am I the kind of guy who would try to steal someone else's girlfriend? Sure, of course. But do I like her? The answer is no. You have nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
So he basically points all these things out that to the audience, to us, or to most people would indicate that he does like her and Mr. Peanut Butter does have something to worry about. Well, okay. He has something to worry about if he's insecure in a relationship. But if someone that's insecure would be worried about that situation. But Bojack sort of says, you've got nothing to worry about. So do we think this is him lying to himself still and to Mr. Peanut Butter?
I don't think he's lying to himself. I think he's just lying to Mr. Peanut Butter.
Okay. But the honesty is almost like just to emphasise the joke? To create, is it just to write a joke about it?
Yeah, I think so.
This is where I'm going to bring up the idea that Bojack isn't in romantic love with Diane.
Okay.
And I think part of this episode, or what I find quite interesting about this episode, is Bojack feeling a connection to someone and seeing that this is a female and putting two and two together. This is where I'm sort of trying to raise the point about I think Bojack's really confused about having a strong connection with someone and being in love with them. I like the idea that he doesn't fancy her. If I can't think of a better word to say.
Okay.
Throughout this episode, and maybe a couple of other episodes going forward, he's struggling to understand that. I don't know whether I'm pulling too much from future episodes, but I think it is. I do get the impression when I watch this episode back, I think he's actually close enough to Diane in sort of a connection and a friendship that he realises that they shouldn't be together. So he's not trying to insert himself into the relationship. He just can't understand why Diane likes Mr. Peanut Butter.
Okay, I disagree.
Okay.
From the very
You think so? So sorry, I said a lot there, but you're disagreeing with the fact that I think it's just a friendship that he's got with her as opposed to a romantic.
Well, you said that you don't think he fancies her, whereas from the very first episode when they meet, there is an implied attraction between them. From that very first scene, when he finds out that she's sleeping with Mr. Peanut Butter,
Yes.
and he's like, "You two sleeping together?" Like what? Because he's so, I don't want to say he hates Mr. Peanut Butter, but he has a lot of disdain for Mr. Peanut Butter, I think. So when he finds out that Diane is hooking up with him, he takes that quite shocked. And so for me, that implies that he is attracted to her from the very beginning. I think he is. I think he does fancy her.
Okay.
And I think, given Bojack's history of working and growing up in Hollywood, I think a lot of things can be very superficial and very short-lived. I mean, being a famous actor, he's over his life. He's probably had his pick of bed partners, right? And I don't think that's anything new to him. I think the difference with Diane is that it's more than that. It's more than just a superficial, shallow, surface-level attraction. Okay. Especially in that little monologue that he gives to Mr. Peanut Butter in this episode, when he says something like, "Does she get me?"
Does she get me in ways no other woman ever has?
Exactly. So I think this initial attraction has now blossomed into something way more, and he is, in a way, doing a typical Bojack thing and living in denial. I think that he does have deep feelings for her, but he's denying those either because she's in a relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter, and deep down he knows that it's wrong to interfere in someone's relationship, regardless of how much of a dick Bojack is. He does seem to have some kind of moral fibre inside him until he gets drunk. Or he doesn't want to make himself vulnerable.
Right, okay.
Because by admitting that you have feelings for someone, that's the most vulnerable that you can probably possibly be. And given Bojack's personality, being open and vulnerable doesn't seem like it comes pretty natural to him. So I think there's an element of respect for Diane that most of the people don't get.
Bojack.
Yeah.
Yes.
He doesn't respect most people. I think he does. Yes. He has a lack of respect for most people, whereas with Diane, he does seem to have a lot of respect.
Yes, and I suppose that's a nice word, actually. Mr. Peanut Butter says, "I can't have you talking to her." And Bojack says, "Well, I work with her, she's writing a book about me." And they come to this weird agreement where Bojack says he won't pursue her romantically, but they will talk and write the book. And they shake on it. Mm-hmm. They shake on this deal. And then Mr. Peanut Butter goes, "Aha, I knew I'd get that handshake." Mm-hmm. And Bojack has this, I think he says, I regret this decision already, sort of thing, like instant regret. But I don't think it's regret about the deal, whatever this weird deal is they've made, but more the fact that he feels like Mr. Peanut Butter's got one up on him again, from all the way back in the airport where he said, "I'm going to get that handshake." Back in the prison, Todd now meets the other gang, the Latin Kings, and this is because they have a random cavity search, and both Todd and this other inmate say, oh, buy a guy a drink first. So they both have a shared sort of sense of humour, so he gets on with them. So yes, the member of the Latin Kings tries to now convince Todd to join their gang. So Princess Caroline invites Diane to her office, and Princess Caroline does this weird thing where she sort of pretends she's never met her. I don't really know what the point of it was, and Diane calls it out, like, "Why, we've met before on a couple of occasions, why are you acting like this?" And Princess Caroline says to Diane, "You've got two men fighting over you." And now this is Diane's turn to have the exaggerated what. Again, this is another point that's emphasising that she may have these developing feelings towards Bojack as well. Mm-hmm. It's not just Bojack falling in love with someone or developing feelings for someone. It's a relationship that's growing, and they both feel the same way. Mm-hmm. So back at Bojack's house, he's working with Mr. Peanut Butter to try and work out how to get rid of the D. They're trying to work out this plan. There's a few jokes about the setup that they've got, about he's using like mustard, and they're using different things on the table to try and map out the plan.
The mustard isn't a thing. The mustard is just mustard.
Mustard is just mustard. But yes, there's a few little jokes there, but it turns out they've also been drinking. They're getting drunk while they've been making this plan. This is when Todd calls Bojack again from prison. This is where he explicitly says, I've landed myself in a 2 days to the prom situation. And he wants to know how Bojack got out of this situation in horsing around. Just before I go on, in the background of the prison, it's called the Hollywood Super.
It's now Hollywood.
Now Hollywood.
Yeah, I saw that straight away. Yeah. I like that.
They've scribbled it out.
Yeah.
So Bojack talks about how his show invented the 2 days to the prom story, which is probably him thinking more about his show than it actually was.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Peanut Butter has a nice line where he says, you may have invented the storyline, but we perfected it on our show. Again, like the one-upmanship. Bojack says, the only thing you perfected was stealing my thunder, which then leads Mr. Peanut Butter to have this sort of thought in his head, or we start to see some cogs turning in his head, essentially, about stealing someone's thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose we don't really know quite what it is yet, but he keeps repeating the line, stealing your thunder, stealing your thunder.
Okay. I've made a connection now.
Okay.
I don't know why. I didn't know why he did that at the time, but now I've just made a connection.
Yes, yeah. So, and then Bojack's like, he's just saying stealing my thunder now.
Yeah.
So he's going to steal. His idea is to steal the stealing of the plan, which Bojack points out later. But Bojack points out we need a big distraction to get rid of the D. Basically, you can take it away in your helicopter, and I'll make a distraction.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is the helicopter that he bought at the restaurant earlier. I hadn't made that connection.
Yes, that's why I had to mention that. Going through that whole thing, I had to mention it.
Yeah.
So Bojack's idea to distract everybody is dropping dollar bills from the roof of the shops.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his hope is that it's going to cause a frenzy or a riot.
Yeah.
And people aren't really that bothered about it. They're sort of saying cash is for poor people, which I think is a bit of a joke.
Well, the point is it was $1 bills.
It was $1 bills, but as Bojack says, it's still free spending.
Yeah.
But I think there is the joke of people don't use cash anymore as much as well, so why are we picking up cash?
I think
someone says cash is for poor people.
I saw it as more of a couple of commentaries. One, that people are ungrateful.
Yes.
That this is free money, but because it's not a lot of free money, they don't really care about it. And also it could be a reflection on kind of the state of inflation. That now $1 bill is nothing. It's not like in this show, in this scene, it's not even worth picking up off the floor.
Yes. Yeah. I had this thought about, I feel like I used to pick up £1 on the floor.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't know if I would now. I don't know, because
well, if you saw £1 on the
if I saw £1, yeah, but if someone saw me picking £1,
I'd pick it up. I'd pick it up.
Mate, I don't want to. I don't know whether it's just my.
That sounds like your ego.
Yeah, it is. I'm not going to lie. It completely is. Like if I saw a video of me picking £1 up off the floor, I'd be like, mate, it's £1.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't be that desperate for £1. And one, I don't even. I have a joke with my partner about not touching money anymore.
Okay.
I can't remember the last time I paid for cash for something.
Okay.
So why am I picking the £1?
I'm trying to pay.
It's going to live in my wallet for 10 years.
I'm trying to pay with cash more often now.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you're right. We should.
Yeah.
It's wrong that we default to it too much. But
so if you saw £1 on the floor,
yes,
in the street,
yeah,
just there, sitting there, no one, it doesn't belong to anyone. You would just walk past and not pick it up.
You know more why the reason the other real reason I wouldn't pick it up is because I've seen too many people gluing money.
You think there's a hidden camera somewhere?
Yeah.
You're gonna get pranked.
I don't want to be that person.
Okay.
That's what I sort of mean about
That's your ego talking.
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah. I wouldn't pretend it's not.
Okay.
But also, I do think there's a level of money that I would have picked up 10 years ago that I wouldn't pick up today, wherever we want to draw that line.
Okay.
So nothing's happening about all these dollar bills that are being dropped on the floor by Bojack until Beyonce walks past and she slips over on the money, which does get everybody's attention. And the news is fascinated with this story for a little bit. There's also loads of puns about Beyonce songs and Destiny's Child songs.
Yeah.
And again, I think this was something it was trying to make a point about celebrity stories, basically.
Yeah,
like trivial celebrity stories.
When they're covering it, I don't know if it's Tom Jumbo Grumbo or the reporter that's on scene, but one of them says something like, "Everyone needs to watch this right now."
Yes,
like, everyone needs to stay tuned to this.
We're going to bring you every update.
Yeah.
This is the most important thing that you've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's easy to make a headline out of. So we won't go for the most interesting story or the most difficult story. We're going to go for the one that you can make the best headline out of. That's how keep people watching. And with the fact that we're that obsessed with celebrities that we want to know what they're doing for some reason all the time.
Yeah.
But this does give Mr. Peanut Butter the chance to move the D with his helicopter because nobody's looking at the sky. Which then cuts us back to the news. And this was a bit of an interesting bit, I thought, actually, where he says Beyonce will never perform again. And then he switches, he goes, but we've got a break in the Hollywood side story, which I've sort of put as like, that's the bit that's actually the news. To say that one of the biggest performers in the world no longer perform anymore is the story. But as soon as the story becomes real, we switch to another story that we can make another. So I thought that was very...
Or it's a commentary on like the short attention span nature of people and news outlets now, where they're constantly flitting from one thing to the next thing.
No, I had that as well. It is just that.
Which again, I mentioned this in a previous episode, but this is even more relevant now than it was when this episode was aired like 10 years ago.
Again here, I'll just point out quickly, they're calling it the Hollywood heist story. Yes, because this breaking the news from Beyonce never performing again is actually going to a live press conference at Mr. Peanut Butter's house. And at this conference, he is taking credit for stealing the D. And he says he stole it to give to his girlfriend, Diane. Bojack says, that son of a bitch, that literal son of a bitch. This is our introduction to Meow Meow Fuzzy Face, the police officer, which I think is really, it's very on the nose. It's a bit too far, I think. But he says, the day they make love a crime is the day I turn in my bag. So it's all very over dramatic. This is when Diane arrives back at Mr. Peanut Butter's house, and she's clearly very shy and embarrassed by the situation. And I don't even know if she says anything, but Mr. Peanut Butter's like, do you love anybody or do you love anything? And she can't even respond to him. This is where it also calls out what you were saying earlier about the D. Did you see the title at the bottom of the article? It's Diane receives D.
Yeah.
So it's really...
That was the moment that really cemented it there. It was like, okay, I'm not just reading too much into this. Like, this is intentional.
It's definitely intentional. But yes, she doesn't seem to like the attention of the news and the media and the spectacle. And there seems to be a disconnect between them. Back in prison, Todd now arrives at this... it is literally a dance. I haven't sort of mentioned that both gangs were like, why don't you come to the dance? Obviously, even that in itself is quite a bizarre concept, that in this prison, there would be like a
prom.
Yes, essentially.
Yeah.
He arrives wearing the Latin King's colours, and he also has Latin King's tattooed on one arm and the sleeve rolled up on that arm, but his other sleeve is down. And he says hello to the Latin Kings and says a couple of lines, and then he makes an excuse. He said he's got to go and do something, and instead of doing that thing, he runs through the crowd and he transforms into a skinhead. He puts a little cap on and he rolls the sleeve down that says Latin Kings, and he rolls the other sleeve up on his other arm, and he's got skinheads, I think, tattooed there. Bojack is now on the phone to Princess Caroline, complaining about how Mr. Peanut Butter has double-crossed him, and he makes a joke about, I didn't even think this person was clever enough to single-cross me, referring to him a bit simple.
Yeah.
I really like this part, actually, where when he's first talking to Princess Caroline says, "What? I have no idea what you're talking about. I do have a life outside of you, It's a really important point for me because it's emphasising the fact that while we're encaged in our worlds, other people are having their lives. They're getting on with things and they're doing things. And again, it's that thing of what seems like a big thing to us is often a small thing to other people, but we can't have their perspective. And in this case, Bojack's complaining about a big thing that's going on in his life at the moment, and just expects everybody also to know exactly what's going on with his emotions and his thoughts. This is where Princess Caroline now explains to Bojack that you may have come up with the log line that he's the one that sold the pitch. It's more on brand for him than it is you. And this is Princess Caroline. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, actually. And it's the framing of things. So it's the way you can have the same action or the same product or the same thought or whatever it is, but it's the context that it's delivered in, which is actually the important thing. And here she's saying that because you're a depressed old drunk that everybody hates, they will hate it when you do this. Whereas if people like you, they will like when you do something like this.
It's the way that it's perceived. And this grand act, this ridiculous thing with Mr. Peanut Butter, it makes people see it as like a big gesture of affection and a grand gesture that's a bit extreme. But if Bojack was to do it, I'm assuming the overall consensus would be desperation.
Yeah.
Like he's done this really over the top thing to try and get someone's approval. So it's quite sad that the same thing can be framed totally differently for different people.
I'm trying not to go into it too much, but this is where I say there's like no such thing as objectivity, because everything we see is through some sort of prism and we can't remove ourselves from it. And it just means that you can never be definitively understanding of one situation. You can never have enough information about what has happened or what something is, because there's always another perspective. There's always some context. You can't remove anything.
Not always.
What is there a situation you can?
Well, if you say there's no such thing as objectivity for everything in any situation, in any context, you're saying that.
I'll stick with that for wherever you're going.
So if we look out the window of my apartment,
yes,
and we see a vehicle on the road with 4 wheels and an engine and a few doors and a steering wheel, is there anyone that would tell you that's not a car?
Someone's never seen a car before. Someone from an Aboriginal tribe looking out the window. And that's just a human.
Okay.
If we move it even further into the animal realm, what does that?
Yeah, but you wouldn't ask an animal because they wouldn't be able to understand you.
But they perceive things.
Yeah, but they can't answer you.
A deaf person, someone that can't speak can't answer me.
They can. No, you can communicate with them.
But they communicate in a different way.
Yeah, you can write stuff down. They still have a language. We're still the same species. But if you say to a dog, write down what you see outside, you're not going to get a coherent answer.
I may well be wrong in my thought that there's no objectivity, and I'm happy to be wrong on that. But my point is that most of the things, actions or thoughts or whatever it is, are less objective than we think. Like there's a framework that we view stuff through that we can't change and is literally different for every person. Like if you look at that, every person looks at your window.
And that's called subjectivity, not objectivity.
Yes. Okay, so everything is subjective.
No, because there are objective truths.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
If I say, so we go back to your Aboriginal tribe, and I say, and I hold my hand up and I say, how many fingers do I have?
Okay, yeah.
They will give me the same answer as anyone else. The words that they use.
Can I be annoying with that question?
Yes, you would ask me about my thumb.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if I ask, okay, how many fingers and how many thumbs do I have?
Okay, but
how many digits do I have?
But maybe there's a tribe, because I'm not in this tribe, because I don't know this tribe. Maybe their perception of what each digit is for or does is
that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to how many there are.
Yes, no, it is. It is relevant because they might say, we don't believe little fingers are fingers. Look at that tiny little finger there. That can't possibly be seen in the same realm as the first three because it's insignificant.
Well, until you find me the first, I refuse to accept that.
Okay, but what I'm saying is,
I don't think it's impossible. So I have a handful of berries. There's 6 berries in my hand.
Okay.
Yeah. How many berries do I have in my hand? Is there anyone that's telling me that there isn't 6?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm saying there's the.
We can only work on the knowledge that we have, right?
Okay.
So until I find someone, until I find someone that tells me there aren't 6 berries and gives me and justifies that their reasoning, then I have to assume that everyone believes that there's 6 berries there because that's an objective truth.
You do, but it's not impossible that someone could see it in a different way.
Yes, someone might be insane.
But we can't remove ourselves from the situation that we are in to another situation.
Yeah, but until I'm provided with that person, I'm going to assume that everyone sees 6 berries because that's an objective truth.
I don't know where we are now.
I'll tell you where we are. You don't believe in objective truth, and I do believe in objective truth.
Okay. I mean, I can't remember where I was going to try and tie us back to the episode, and I can't remember why I was talking about objectivity or. Right. Sorry. Yes. So it's the context that something is delivered in that is more, in my view, is more important than what it is.
Okay.
Or I will definitely settle for is massively, the context is massively underrated in how important it is in how we perceive something.
Okay.
That's what, because I think there is objective stuff, and there is stuff that everybody will agree on, or most people will agree on, and there has to be a point somewhere where we say that this is something and this is not something. But Princess Caroline is highlighting that the context of Mr. Peanut Butter stealing something as a romantic gesture is different to Bojack stealing it for a romantic gesture. Yeah. So the act is the same, but the delivery and the context,
how it's perceived is different.
Yes. We both agree with that, don't we?
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Princess Caroline also says this is the bold romantic gesture that movies are based on. And she says to her assistant, check if anyone's bought the rights yet. Thinking about, I can make a movie out of this, potentially. Princess Caroline also says to Bojack, you could never express your feelings the way that he has. This is why it works for him. It is why it doesn't work for you. And he says, that's not true. I can express my feelings. And we get a cutscene here of Bojack holding his hand over a flame saying, nothing on the inside, nothing on the outside, suggesting that he's emotionally the opposite to what he was saying, basically. So he was saying he can express feelings, and he's demonstrating that he isn't able to even express physical feelings, let alone emotional feelings.
Yes.
Back in jail again, Todd is continuing to date both gangs, and I think it's still going okay at this point. He's still jumping between the gangs without any problems. This is when Diane actually turns up at Bojack's house again to reconvene working on the book. And maybe I don't think this is called out, but maybe this is because Diane doesn't want to have the conversation with Mr. Peanut Butter about the sign, the gesture. It's very late. She's almost like, I don't know what to do, so I'll pretend that I've got to go and do some work. And Diane says, the jury is still out on how I feel about it. And this is where Bojack explains that the reason Diane didn't like it is because it wasn't a Diane thing, it was a Mr. Peanut Butter thing. And he says a Diane thing would have been an iPod loaded up with your favourite podcasts, including this one, and a practical house plan, or a bound album of photos and emails that he saved. Bojack says, you should be with someone who knows you. And Diane says, like who? And just at that moment, the tape recorder makes a bit of a noise and they're interrupted at this moment. So we don't necessarily know what Bojack was going to respond with, whether he was going to say like me or like with someone else. But
because
there's an awkwardness.
He doesn't know that it's being recorded.
I think he forgets.
Because he's like, and then he's like, oh, well, this is being recorded. And then he like stops and like...
He doesn't know. He's fortunate aware that this is now on tape and he's been talking about... You see, this is where even in here, I don't think he's declaring his love for her. He's showing that he knows her and understands her. But
he's resisting his vulnerability.
Okay. But whether he was then going to say, I should be with you, or you should be with me, is still ambiguous. And I think that's deliberate. And again, I think it emphasizes the point that Bojack's not coming out explicitly and saying, I want to be with you and you shouldn't be with Mr. Peanut Butter. Whether that's, like you were saying, because of vulnerability, I think that's a good point as well.
I think that he's built a wall around himself and it's like him against the world, and he's so used to being lonely and emotionally unavailable, and just the world has abandoned him. So he's stepped away from the world kind of thing, and emotions are part of that.
Yes.
I think he's walled himself off slightly. And I think Diane's the first person that's come along for a long time that's managed to get through that.
I think here, although I was putting a lot of emphasis on Bojack not responding when the tape recorder happened, so Diane says, like who? Actually, you could switch the emphasis to Diane saying, like who? And her phrase there being like an invitation to Bojack to say, I want you to say, like me. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's like,
yeah.
Like I've sort of read it one way, but now I'm thinking about it again. It's Diane also not wanting. It is vulnerable.
Yes.
In emotional.
Yeah. She knows what he's talking about.
Yes. And she
when
wants
she said like who, like she wants him to say like me. She's inviting him to say that. Yeah.
Yes, we can look at it that way.
Absolutely.
I'm still going to revert back to, like I've talked about Bojack trying to think about or grapple with this emotion, this relationship. I think you could probably say the same thing about Diane. She's trying to grapple with this relationship. That's what it is. Todd is continuing to court both of the gangs, and this time when he jumps over to one of the other gangs, he forgets to roll down one of the arms and take the bandana off. Both gangs know that he's been playing them off, not playing them off against each other, but trying to be part of both gangs. And they're both not happy about it and both questioning why. And then this is where Todd has a little speech where he says he didn't want to choose between them. And if they just both took the time to get to know each other, he says he doesn't even think we'd need gangs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We could all be one happy family, and it could be a lovely environment.
Yeah, it's supposed to be one of those iconic peacemaking speeches.
Yes, because we also get some heartwarming music, but instead of a heartwarming moment, it cuts to the news where the presenter tells us there is now a full-on race war in the prison.
Mm-hmm.
But before he reports more on the race war, they want to give us more information about the Holly Woo sign and the new hot couple that everybody's talking about. So Bojack's in the bar, drinking away his problems. Diane has gone back to Mr. Peanut Butter's house, and there's the race war going on, and it sort of jumps between these two, and it sort of uses the news to jump between those scenes. Actually, it works quite well in the show and the edit, but it's just a little bit confusing for me to talk about. But Bojack is in the bar drinking, like he always does, and he's leaving another voice. Well, he's tried to call.
He's back at his new restaurant.
He is, yes. So, yeah, he's at the bar at his new restaurant. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, but he's trying to call Diane because it sounds like he wants to tell her something, basically. But it goes through to a voicemail because Diane is at home with Mr. Peanut Butter, and Mr. Peanut Butter set out this romantic setting in the living room. He's got candles, and I think there's strawberries dipped in chocolate. He's also made her exactly what Bojack said, a bound album of photos and emails that he saved. So that was something that Bojack suggested that she would like, and now Mr. Peanut Butter has actually done this of his own initiative, his own volition.
Yeah.
And this is where Diane's very much, she's actually ignored the phone call from Bojack, and she's very much appreciating Mr. Peanut Butter. She's enjoying this. She's realised.
Yeah, she laughs at his jokes and stuff.
Mr. Peanut Butter says he's also sorry about earlier, and maybe the deal was a bit overkill. So Bojack is also continuing to leave a voicemail, and he says, "It's really hard to have somebody you don't know you. And I guess you do know me, Diane. I know I'm not perfect, and I actually kind of hate myself most of the time. But when I'm with you, I don't hate myself. I like being around you, and I don't know if I've ever told you that." So Bojack's really opening up here. Mr. Peanut Butter says he's got a question for Diane. No cameras, no big spectacle, just you and me. And he says to Diane, "Will you marry me?" And she says yes. At this point, we have a massive unveiling of everybody that's actually there. We have balloons come out, we have cameras come out, the windows open, and there's people there taking pictures. And again, there's a big spectacle.
Like it's part of his reality TV show.
Yes.
Even though he's just said that there's just me and you and there's no cameras. Like,
yes, I said it makes us think that it was just an act.
Yeah.
It makes us feel like it's disingenuous, and he was only doing it for the image of what it was, rather than that that it actually was important.
Yeah.
I feel like Diane at this point and the audience feel like they've been lied to in this moment. And again, this was a Peanut Butter thing disguised as a Diane thing. It shows how upset and how hurt she is by it, actually, when she's looking at the ring and she's not even smiling at it. She's really like put back by this situation. But Mr. Peanut Butter is off talking to people and celebrating and saying well, how wonderful this moment is and how romantic it was. So Bojack's finished the voicemail, and he doesn't think Diane's going to call him back. So he says to the bartender at his new restaurant, he says, "Get out of the consolation scotch." And then Diane calls him, and he goes, "Make that celebration scotch." And the bartender says, "What's the difference?" And Bojack shouts at the bartender saying, "It's the same thing. So go with some scotch." I quite like this sort of, maybe it is a bit of an alcoholic mentality that you actually assign categories to alcohol, even though it's the same thing. there's just a different mentality there. And it's like he's annoyed that he's got to explain that it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I just like the joke there. Bojack answers the call from Diane and she says, "This is weird. I'm engaged." Mm-hmm. And even in this phone call with him, she's really like, it's not the conversation of someone that's happy to have just been engaged. It's not exactly full of enthusiasm. And this is actually, in this celebration of this moment, the person she reaches out to is Bojack. So she reaches out to somebody to give her comfort, and this person is not her. Well, we know what her family's like from the last episode, mm-hmm. And we haven't really seen bigger friendships or anything, but she's reaching out to this mm-hmm. potential third wheel of another.
Maybe there's an element that she wants to tell him before anyone else does as well.
Okay, yeah.
That they've come throughout the course of this episode, especially they've come to this understanding that there's something going on between them. I don't know. She might be aware that he would be hurt if he found out that she's engaged through someone other than her.
Maybe like she's saying, this is weird.
Yeah.
Like, I know we had a thing. She's almost saying, right, we had the start of a thing going on and now it can't happen.
And she doesn't wait as well. Like, this is almost immediately afterwards. Like, while Mr. Peanut Butter is doing his Mr. Peanut Butter thing, she goes outside and the first person she calls is Bojack, almost straight away.
So in the 2 days to the prom situation, she has now chosen someone.
Yeah.
And she got to...
But she's still trying to appease the other person. She's still trying to hold on to the other person.
Okay, I thought I was going to say she's let them down, but you're right. No, she's trying to appease the other person. And I don't think I actually mentioned it when it happened, but in the phone call earlier, when Todd's like, I'm in a 2 days to the prom situation, Bojack says it never works out well.
Yeah,
trying to keep both people happy. During this celebration, someone comes in to take the D away back to the Hollywood sign, because now they know where it is. They can take it back to the sign. But the helicopter gets hit by one of the fireworks of the celebration for the engagement. But while this helicopter is going down, we cut back to the prison and Todd is about to have his jaw broken by these gangs.
He's biting the curb.
But this is where they are coming together.
Yeah.
These gangs are
okay. Okay.
I think they even say something like, now we are doing this together. How do you like this?
Yeah.
But just as this is about to happen, the helicopter crashes into the prison and all these prisoners just escape. Mm-hmm. And Todd's left there sort of probably feeling quite lucky that he's still alive. Mm-hmm. Everything's worked out okay for Todd. Mm-hmm. And Todd ends the episode by saying, what a twist. And they say there's no new stories in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. But, and I can't remember why I mentioned it earlier in this podcast, but this feels like a very deliberate message of there's no new stories in Hollywood at the end of an episode that is discussing one of the oldest stories.
Well, that's why you mentioned it earlier.
Yes, yeah. So I don't know, is there something that Raphael's trying to tell us about stories and there being no stories? Is he just slamming in our face that there is no new stories? There is only these old tropes that we're only ever going to hear of. Or actually Todd's story is just the main story told in a wackier way.
Okay.
So it's almost like the light relief of the main story. But why? Why?
Yeah.
That's one thing. Like, I get that I can see the stories are the same or similar premises. And I get that Todd's is a bit wacky because no one's actually in that situation where they have to court. They have to.
The difference is as well is that the conclusions are totally different. That in the main storyline, that Diana's chosen her suitor, whereas in Todd's storyline, he didn't choose either of them.
Right.
And they both fell out with him, and then in the end, everyone escaped anyway.
Right.
So the conclusions are different.
Yes, I like that. I was trying to think about the idea that everything is the same story, but the point of storytelling is to put a new twist on it.
Okay, yeah.
is to put a new perspective on it, is to challenge what you thought about the story.
Okay.
Maybe in Todd's side story, we have this sitcom-like notion that everything is okay at the end. No matter what difficulties you go through, if you had this 2-date situation in your life, don't worry, it will be okay at the end. Because if you follow Todd's story, it's okay. He's out of prison. He's alive. He's not had to choose.
Is Todd's story always a microcosm of the main story?
I don't know now. This is something I'm discovering doing this.
Yeah, because if we go back to the one where he's got his Japanese girlfriend, and we discovered through the podcast that that was just a microcosm of the overarching theme of everyone hears what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So
I can't think about all the other episodes now because I'm so engrossed in it.
Yeah.
But I think it could be an interesting idea of the role that Todd's character plays in the story.
That potentially Todd's story, every one of Todd's storylines could be a reflection of what Bojack's or the main characters are going through.
I was going to say a reflection, but also a different perspective on the same story.
Okay, yeah.
But that's not true for the one we were talking about, where they literally get their Japanese con artists, because it is the same thing. Like they're both thinking what they want. What did we say about that?
Everyone hears what they want to hear.
So they all have the same story, but I suppose they don't just have the same story, but they have the same perspective.
Okay.
Whereas here, the same story, but a different outcome. And I feel like one of the outcomes is the traditional nice to hear story, because we all want to know, we all want to know that if there's a difficulty that we have, it's going to be okay. And that's, again, going back to the theme of the show for me, generally, that it might be okay at the end, but also it might get worse, or it might get better and then get worse, or it might get worse still and then get better. Like, it's not a linear path of you're going to have a difficulty or a difficult situation and you will be okay at the end. With Diane as the central character, we haven't got a resolution. We've got an ongoing situation that is, as we've been discussing, really, is more complex than just a woman trying to decide between two men.
Mm-hmm.
So in Diane's story, there is not a clear resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And that is more reflective of life than Todd's story.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is this episode presents us with what we would like to happen and what actually happens. Yeah. I don't know. To be fair, this might be my pessimistic view, but there isn't a happy ending.
Okay. No, because in this situation, someone's going to be unhappy.
Yes. But Todd's story presents a situation where there is a happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's free. Everyone's out of jail.
Yep.
I don't think we'd expect Todd to be in jail for the rest of the season or the rest of the show. So
yeah, we're expecting to be a fugitive there.
We would expect him. That's a very good point. But he survived the story. And I suppose, again, not to rehash what I'm saying every time in a different way, but Diane hasn't survived her story.
Okay. And
I don't know if the stories that actually happen in our lives, I don't know if we survive them.
Okay. I think you're reading way too much into it.
Okay.
I think it's a bog standard story.
Projecting onto it.
I think
about me not having a happy ending to situations that I'm in.
Possibly. Maybe it's like you said, like a pessimistic view of it.
Okay.
I think it's just a standard story. It's a tropey story. I think it's one story that we've seen countless times throughout all of time, through different media. Love the love triangle issue, and Todd's storyline is just a microcosm of that, like we've seen in previous episodes. And I think the last line that Todd says, there's no new stories in Hollywood, I think that's just the writers admitting that this has been done before.
So that was sort of the first thing I was saying is literally it's just that this whole episode is just the writers saying to us,
Yeah, this has been done before.
It's a classic story.
Yeah.
That definitely plays as well. I think my favourite visual joke I've written was the tennis balls in Mr. Peanut Butter's car boot.
Yeah,
it was just fun of them.
It was the bear for me. The bear on the honey side. Yeah.
There's been a couple of episodes recent. The ones we've just watched have been a little sparse on visual comedy, where we're starting to get a bit more now, which is good. I've written a favourite. I've got a favourite line actually. I really like. I really like. It's not a favourite line. They're like bits of dialogue, but what a really favourite bit of mine was when Bojack says, "I didn't say anything incriminating, did I?" And Diane says, "Not as incriminating as that question." I just really like that. And when Princess Caroline says, "Well, I have no idea what you're talking about. I do have a life outside of you, you know." And I like that calling the different, again, not to go back to the same point, but the idea that a big deal for me isn't a big deal for you. And we so often forget that.
Yeah, I think for me, when he gets the vodka out and he says, "What is this, breakfast?"
Yes.
I think that's just, it's very Bojack.
Yeah.
It's very representative of the state of Bojack's life, because he says it like a throwaway joke, but he kind of means it as well.
Yeah. I feel like you did mention a few final thoughts, but let's go for final thoughts and rating.
Pretty boring, pretty straightforward. What's this, episode 6?
Yes.
Yeah. If it wasn't for doing this podcast, I definitely would have given up again already. Episode rating 5, maybe. Just middle of the road. It wasn't. I didn't think it was.
It wasn't terrible.
It wasn't bad. There was a couple of nice jokes in there, but it's a story that we've heard over and over again. I like the characters less and less with every episode. Yeah, like I said, even Diane now, I'm starting to dislike her because she's flaky, indecisive, and I think she's in denial as well. I think that by this point, everyone knows that she wants to try something with Bojack, but she's continuing this relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter that, for one reason or another, I don't know why, but yeah. And I'm not saying that the relationship with Diane and Bojack would be good. In fact, I think the opposite. I think it would be a terrible relationship, because I don't think Bojack's in a position to be in a relationship.
Do you mean because of like substance abuse, or do you mean because of where he is in life?
Where he is. I think sometimes people go to relationships looking for validation and looking for the wrong thing. If you can't take care of yourself, then you shouldn't go into a relationship expecting to take care of someone else. Not that you need to take care of the other person in the relationship, but if your relationship to yourself is toxic, then the relationship that you have with other people can often be toxic as well. So I think he needs to have a long, hard look inwards before he looks outwards. Having said that, finding the right person might help to drag him out of whatever hole he's dug himself. So yeah, 5, middle of the road, just standard cartoon, just nothing special. This is not the greatest animated show ever made. It's far from
That's
it.
okay. That's
Far
okay.
from it.
Wouldn't it be nice if you got to the end and you thought it was, and I played all of these?
I hope I'm proved wrong.
Yes.
I hope I'm proved wrong.
I thought there was a few funny moments. There's a few moments I remember as well, which I quite liked. Again, even though it's my own perception, I'm actually enjoying the development of the relationship between Diane and Bojack. Like I say, like the idea that they're trying to work out what this relationship is, rather than it's a simple love triangle. They don't, neither of them know what it is. I've written, I didn't get a lot from Todd's story, but actually a little bit. I've sort of convinced myself in this episode a little bit more that it's another really nice example of our perception of what reality is through media versus what it is in real life. And I quite like that. So I like Todd's story a little bit more than I used to. I am rating it a 7.
What a surprise.
What a surprise.
So you get 7 to everyone next time, I think.
Do you know what? When I wrote 7, I was like, oh my God, I've done so many 7s. They're all just 7, which as I've been editing some of the episodes of this podcast, I realised that I do want to downgrade an episode, which is possible, or upgrade an episode in the future. Because I've said it's okay to do that. So episode 4, Zoe and Zelda's, I'm moving down to a 5. Just because it was more average than good. And I think I put it in the good with the rating, but it is an average episode. So I'm moving one of my episodes down to a 5. This one is a 7 for me. IMDb have an average rating of 7.8. So it's high 7. This is the highest rated episode on IMDb that we've watched so far. Does that surprise you?
Yes.
Okay. What? Yeah, because I think yours was episode 2.
Yeah, the Navy SEAL one's the best episode so far, by far.
And that's, I'd completely agree with that. But this one is the highest so far.
I don't get that at all.
It's just a good show.
It's that bear. It's the honey bear. It's carrying it all. Yeah. That one joke is.
To be fair, there's quite a few visual jokes in that first bit that probably everyone was just after that, like, you can do anything now in the episode, and it's a good episode. Yeah. So thank you for listening. In the next episode, we will be discussing Series 1, Episode 7, Say Anything. Thank you for listening.